think we're ready to get started now. So I'd like to welcome you all to the 2018 Grand Marshal and President of the Union debates. My name is Sunny Sen, and I'm from the RPI Debate Club, and I'll be moderating the PU debate today. So for the first hour or so, we'll have our President of the Union debate, then we'll take a short break, and we'll do Grand Marshal after that. Before we get going, I'd like to thank UPAC Sound, UPAC Lights, RPI TV, the GM Week Committee, Rules and Elections, and everyone else who made this debate possible here today. So I'd like to introduce our two candidates here today, Justin Etzstein and Ida Edamati. In terms of the format, we'll be having 2-minute opening statements first, and then we'll have moderated questions for the first portion of this debate. In terms of how this will go, I'll ask a question, and then each of you will have 1 minute to respond. You are allowed to have a rebuttal or response to your opponent's question. If you'd like to do that, just sort of let me know. Say you'd like to have a rebuttal, raise your hand, whatever works for you, and you'll have 30 seconds for that. At the end of all of that, we'll have an audience question period, and that'll have the same 1 minute response time. In terms of timing, for our candidates in the front here, once you see Varun raise his hand, he'll raise his hand when there's about 5 seconds left. So just finish up your thought, and that'll be the end of that. So without further ado, we can get started. And we'll start with opening statements. So Justin, if you'd like to go first, the floor is yours.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Etzstein, and I'm running for President of the Union. I'm currently an MBA student as part of my co-terminal program, and previously I was a computer science and IT undergrad. And about a year ago, when I was running for Grand Marshal, I made a promise to each and every one of you that I would stand up for student rights no matter what the context. I never really expected it to be in the form of our union, but nonetheless, I still think I've held true to that promise. And so I'm running for President of the Union first and foremost on a platform that emphasizes carving out a future for a student-run union. Unfortunately, our union is not currently student-run. You can come up with whatever terms you want to define it, but the bottom line is that the guarantees that made our union student-run are not currently in place. And so first and foremost, we need to ensure that we can return to a student-run union, both for the benefit of our current students and our future students. Some of the other areas that I'm looking to focus on include operational efficiency improvements and accountability for our executive board, increasing the diversity of thought and people on our executive board, and increasing the amount of resources we provide to our clubs and club officers. And I'm really looking forward to telling you about my platform and my experience tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Ida?
Hi everyone, I'm Ida, and I'm running for President of the Union. Yet again, thank you for everyone who came out tonight, the Debate Club, UPAC Lights, RPI TV, and everyone who let me come speak to your clubs. If I've seen you already, hello, welcome back, nice to see you again. On the e-board, I've served in almost every aspect, helping students through budgeting and helping them do the programs and activities that they want to do. I want to be able to continue prioritizing students and putting students first in every aspect of what we do here in the union, including maintaining the facilities that they use, keeping their spaces for students, and improving those facilities overall, looking for new spaces and increasing diversity on campus and the events that we hold to uphold that diversity on campus, as well as improving the transparency of the union executive board to allow students to know what the executive board is doing with the activity fee that's being paid every single year. I look forward to speaking more on my platform as well, and I hope that you can see my experiences shine through as I speak more about what I want to do with the union next year. Thank you so much.
All right, awesome. So then we'll start with the moderated questions. Once again, you have 1 minute to respond, and as you go back and forth, I'll specify if it's a specific question for a specific candidate. So the first question is, why run for President of the Union? Why is this position important to you? And we'll start with Ida.
I guess I can start out with a story. This year, I got to represent various special interest and hobby clubs, one of which is going to nationals, and I got to help them budget through that process. We are the primary financial budgeting body of the union, and one of the things that makes me so proud is being able to see our club succeed and see how a student-run union can help support them in that process. I hope to help them move forward and see an increase of the growth and opportunity that the union's able to offer to them, and I hope to be able to continue that and improve upon that as we move forward.
Thank you. Justin?
So I've been involved in the union since the first day I've set foot on campus. My roles have varied. I've participated in the club budgeting process as a treasurer. I've taken a club through the new recognition process. I've participated in student government for 4 years now, most recently as Grand Marshal. And the union is incredibly important to me, and the future for our union is incredibly important to me. And at this point, I believe that I bring something valuable to the role of President of the Union. As Grand Marshal, I was able to work very closely with the President of the Union, other than just sharing an office with him. I've attended more e-board meetings than I can count. I've sat in on the budgeting process. I've seen the operations from the other side. I've seen what can work, and I can see what can't work based on what we've done in the Senate this year. And I think that the Executive Board could really benefit from some of the changes that we've made in the Senate this year. The way that the e-board's operating is not working. And
You can
so
finish your sentence. But
we're looking to improve that in the coming year.
Thank you. Next question, compare your leadership style with the e-board to that of previous presidents of the union.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Compare your leadership style with the e-board to previous presidents of the union. And we'll start with Justin.
I think something that Matt and I do very similarly is we try to give compliments in public and criticisms in private. And the reason for that is because I very strongly believe in positive reinforcement. When someone's doing a good job, I think that that's something we should be highlighting because they deserve to feel proud about what they've done and what they're contributing. And it's shown to really help when it comes to motivating students, especially those who aren't involved, to be involved. Contrast, one thing that I do differently is I encourage everyone to ensure that they're representing in student government, representing the interests of the student body and what's best for the union, not what their personal predispositions are. And that's something that I very highly prioritize and would prioritize as president of the union.
Thank you. Ida?
As president of the union, one thing that I would plan to do differently is focus more on our committees. I really want to make sure that committees set projects at the beginning of the year and they continue to follow through on them. One of the projects coming up next year that we're looking forward to is continuing to refurbish the top floor of the union. I really hope that as president of the union, I can help our committees be guided through these projects and maintain our priorities that we want to keep overall. In comparison, one thing that I think that we will both do, or that I will do as president of the union, that I think that Matt also did really well, is maintain to stay unbiased during our executive board meetings, to moderate meetings and keep them going efficiently and make sure discussion happens inside of meetings. Whether meetings go on long or short, it's important for students to know what we're discussing inside of meetings.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the greatest strength and weakness between the e-board and club relationship currently? And we'll start with Ida.
Can you repeat that question again?
What is the greatest strength and weakness between the e-board and club member relationship currently? And we'll start with Ida.
The greatest strength I see is whenever e-board representatives go to work with their clubs, whenever they go see club operations, they will go to club meetings, general body meetings. Whenever we interact, you really see the e-board and club officer relationship prosper. One of the weaknesses that I've seen this year is I think that executive board representatives reached out a little bit too late in the year. I would have really liked to see more updates in the club budgets and improvements through CMS for club budgeting for this year. So I think that if we began doing budgeting and working with our clubs earlier in the year, then we'd be able to see maybe newer programs and activities for clubs in the coming years.
Thank you. Justin?
So there's no way that we can have all 300 clubs sit on the executive board at the same time. And so that's why the executive board representatives are really so important. It's really making sure that all of our clubs and organizations have a role in our union's operations. And that's what's most important for the executive board role, the executive board representative role. But it's really not occurring to the extent that it should be. Especially throughout this campaign, I've been talking to club officers, and they weren't even aware, they're funded clubs, and they weren't even aware they had an executive board representative, let alone who it was. And that's not okay, because these are the people who are making the decisions on their finances for their clubs, for every student, the $300 that you give to the union. It's very important that we try to metricize and quantify the meetings that we have between club representatives and their clubs. and inputting requirements to ensure that they are, in fact, meeting with their clubs, because that's not occurring as regularly as it should be.
Thank you. Next question, describe your selection process, if elected, for selecting your executive board members. And we'll start with Justin.
So if anyone here has actually applied for the e-board before, I'm sure there are people in the room, you'll remember that the executive board application right now is very long. You have to fill out between 5 and 7 questions depending on which PU is writing the application. Then you have to fill them out to the best of your ability as quickly as possible, because we have to get the board representatives appointed in 2 weeks. So I'd like to take that, shorten the application, and take those questions into the interview. Partly because there are students who are just thrown off by the thought that they have to fill out this very long application if they're not previously involved, but also because we want to get every type of student, including those who are not necessarily the best writers, and ensuring that we actually promote the application more than just an email to club officers, making sure we're getting out there, maybe even have an info session for the executive board position, the representative position, and understanding what the position does is very important.
Thank you. Ida?
I plan to make a more diverse executive board next year by specifically reaching out to different groups on campus, including graduate students through the Grad Council, Greek Life through reaching out to the Interfraternity Council and PANHEL, as well as all the multicultural organizations and different clubs that we have on campus. We like seeing students involved, and we like seeing students involved in the union and involved in the e-board who are participating in more and more events on campus. While reaching out, we want to make sure that we continue to educate people as to what the executive board does and the different bodies of student government do, so that they know what their roles are entering the executive board and how they can impact the union through that.
Thank you. Next question is, what is the greatest strength of your opponent's platform? And we'll start with Ida.
I think the greatest strength is probably his previous IT experience. I think that gives him a lot of knowledge as to how to update the union website and maintain student government communication through the website and through different online resources.
Thank you. Justin?
I think one of Ida's strengths is the extent to which she talks about how she'll actually implement facilities renovations. Since they're part of the union plan, they do the union strategic plan, they need to occur, but I like how she talks about the different steps that she's going to go through to implement those facility changes.
Thank you. The next question, do you plan to further any of the progress that the current president of the union has started?
Could you repeat that question?
Sure. Do you plan to continue any of the progress that the current president of the union has started? And we'll start with Justin.
So one thing that has changed this year with the executive board is the splitting up of the policies committee responsibilities into the policies piece that stayed with the policies committee, and then the introduction of the club operations committee. They've now been clearly defined with responsibilities in the bylaws. But I'd like to take that a step further and ensure that, and work on that to ensure that the Club Operations Committee and the Policies Committee still have that symbiotic relationship between the policies that are being created that clubs then need to follow. And so I definitely would like to expand upon the work that Matt has done there, and potentially even expand or increase the frequency of the committee chair meetings for that exact purpose, to ensure that our committee chairs are interacting, potentially even on a weekly basis.
Thank you. Ida?
A few of the projects that I would be planning to continue as president of the union would include making the Multicultural Leadership Council a standing committee of the executive board. I think it's really important to make sure that our different diverse groups on campus have a voice and that they're heard within the student government structure of the Rensselaer Union. Another thing I hope to continue upon is the hiring of the new director of the union. Keep students involved in every step of the hiring process, and continue working with administrators in order to ensure that all students have a voice in this hiring and that we know who's going to be the next director. And then also, as Justin said, continuing to keep the club operations committee running and making sure that we got over 30 new club requests this year, making sure that they're all able and capable of going through due process and have the same opportunity to become a club as everyone else does.
The next question is, do you feel that current executive board transparency is good, bad, and do you plan to do anything about it either way? And we'll start with Ida.
One thing that I plan to do that I think could be improved upon is getting our agendas out to the general populace ahead of time. Most clubs and organizations, like in this previous few weeks, whenever the ad hoc committee came in, we were discussing the status of various clubs on campus. These clubs didn't know that we would be discussing them because agendas come out 24 hours prior and they're simply distributed to the executive board. I plan to publicly place the executive board agendas inside of the union and hopefully publish them online 24 hours before, whenever executive board representatives are also notified, so that students can see what we're talking about and they can attend if they're interested in giving their input as to what we're talking about.
Thank you. Justin?
No, I don't think that the executive board's operations are nearly as transparent as they need to be. First and foremost, I mean, when you think of your local government or your state or federal government, when you give your taxes, you expect the government to keep you posted on what is happening with your money. It's not your job to find out what's going on. It's their job to keep you informed. And you should be expecting, I believe you should be expecting the same thing from your executive board and from your student government overall. It's very important to ensure that unless there is a very, very specific need for confidentiality, it is your right to know what is going on with your money, and how you want to find out is completely up to you. Whether you want to be in attendance at the meetings, whether you want to participate in the public executive board mailing list. There's a public and private piece on the Senate and the executive board side for that reason. Or if you want to watch from the comfort of home, from a recording or from a live stream, or if you want to read the minutes, all of these things are valid ways that you can keep yourself informed if you so choose.
Thank you. Next question. Student rights is often a topic that seeps into discussion when talking about the union. On a scale of reserved to outspoken, where do you think you will be when it comes to discussing student rights? I'll start with Justin.
I think I would be very outspoken as I continue to be. Though I would say that the Grand Marshal, first and foremost, is the person who really should be outspoken all the time when it comes to these matters. But I think that it's very important that the Grand Marshal and the President of the Union speak on matters that pertain to student rights, especially together, because that unified front is very important. And so even though the executive board, the President of the Union's responsibility is more operational in dealing with the executive board, it is very important that we have President of the Union that stands up for student rights, just as the Grand Marshal does.
Thank you. Ida?
As president of the union, I plan to be very outspoken. Current administrators, as well as some of my fellow peers, are aware that I'm very outspoken, and I plan to continue that moving forward. One thing that I think is important to continue doing while being outspoken is to communicate with students where their activity fee is going, where their money is going, so there really is no room for others to come in and control where our money is going in our union, and so we can continue to choose where our money is going, and that we can maintain that communication between the executive board and the student body.
Thank you. The next question. What was the greatest issue with this year's executive board as a whole, and how do you plan to address it? And we'll start with Ida.
The executive board this year had a few issues with maintaining, with differing opinions, and then over time, opinions would just muddle together, and we didn't take the full amount of time to discuss them. Although meetings can go on for a pretty long time, and sometimes it seems inefficient, I still think that it's really important to keep these meetings long and make sure that everything that needs to be said on a topic is said. Whenever it's said, this means that it can go into into the meeting minutes. It's public information. I don't think that we need to have discussions behind closed doors. Everything should be out in the open and in the minutes and able to be public for students to see. I think that that's one thing that we lacked on this year as an executive board and that we could continue to improve on.
Thank you. Justin?
I think it's very important that our executive board, like the Senate, makes decisions that are best for the union or best for the student body. This year we've seen a lot of decisions be made, a lot of, name it, be appointments, approvals, reappropriations that were made based on personal opinions or personal relationships and emotions. And that's not appropriate because I may not like someone, but they may have the best idea that may come forward for the benefit of the union. And it's very important that you set aside your personal beliefs for the benefit of the union, ensuring that decisions are being made because you believe that it will actually provide something beneficial to the union or have some kind of positive impact on the student body. That's very important.
Thank you. The next question is, how would you encourage club growth and formation? I'll start with Justin.
It's not easy taking a club through the process. It's also not a very easily to find process. It's gotten easier in the past, I'd say, 2.5 years. But it's very important that we're providing the resources up front for students who want to start a club. As GM, I'd actually got a couple emails through the course of the year of students who wanted to form new clubs and how they could go about doing that. And I had to get them back to the policy chair at the time, now the club operations chair, to ensure that they were given the information that they needed to, how they could go through the process. And I think that we need to make sure that that process is, first off, as lean as possible, because we shouldn't be making our students go through a bunch of hoops in order just to form a club. But we also want to make sure that those steps are easily accessible and easily understandable to students who may not be even involved in clubs currently.
Thank you. Ida?
To continue club growth, I think that starts with more communication with executive board representatives. The budgeting process starts out with clubs planning every single program that they want to do over the course of the year, and a lot of times how executive board representatives start the budgeting process is by looking at the previous fiscal year's programs. One thing that's really important to look at is how much of the budget was spent for that fiscal year to see if that program was done, if it was done to its fullest extent, and how successful that program was. Once looking at that, we can see if we need new programs, if they need more funding, if they need to add in more programs, and how much we need to change their setup for the next year. And if they need help doing that, then we have resource people to help them along with that process.
Thank you. And just as a general reminder, if you guys want to make a response to your opponent's comments, you're welcome to do so. So next question is, so say you have an executive board member who's struggling with the work-life-school balance. How exactly would you help them out, and sort of how much rope would you give them? And we'll start with Ida.
You said the executive board representative that's new. How would we help them along?
Someone that's struggling, yeah. Like, how would you help them along? At what point do you sort of need to cut them loose to an extent? How would you go about that?
So whenever we first join the executive board, we're assigned a list of clubs. The first thing that we usually do is reach out to those clubs and get to know them, get to know their club officers. We want to make sure that we have that face-to-face interaction to start out with. And then after that, we want to make sure that that executive board representative knows how the club management system works, CMS. If there are any club officers here, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. And along with that, executive board representatives are required to attend one committee meeting or join one committee. We can look at all the committees that are available, the jobs that they do. These span from the marketing in the union, the business operations, club operations, programming overall. And that executive board representative can choose to do any one of those things to best apply their abilities so that we have a fully functioning board that can hopefully serve cohesively, and then at that point I can loosen the reins and they'll learn how to fit in from there.
Thank you. Justin?
So I'll tell you a story. I had a student on the Student Senate this past year that approached me back in November and was saying, oh, you know, I'm absolutely swamped with work, and I'm missing committee meetings. I really still want to be a part of the Senate, and I just don't know what to do. And I sat down with them, and they're a graduate student. Graduate students have to only sit on one committee as opposed to undergraduate senators sit on two. And I walked them through the requirements that they had, made sure that they were aware of all their time commitments, which they were. And we worked through with the committee chair and the vice grand marshal to ensure that they could miss meetings when they needed to work on work. They stayed informed and participated in discussions when they could, and worked on a project even though they couldn't make the committee meeting time. And they approached me a little earlier this semester and said, if it wasn't for that conversation where we talked about all the different time commitments and finding how we can be flexible about it, they likely would have left the Senate. And that was really meaningful, and I would hope to ensure that we continued that same flexibility as President of the Union.
Thank you. Next question, is there anything that you'll have to improve upon to become an effective president of the union? I'll start with Justin.
Well, I'm definitely not a traditional PU candidate. I've been involved in student government for 4 years, and I've even been Grand Marshal, but I'm not a member of the executive board. That is true. And I will be relying on the more experienced board members to ensure that we have smooth transitions between the previous and future executive boards. And so that's something that I definitely plan to work on. But what I hope to bring to the table are my experiences and understanding and depth of understanding from the different aspects of student government that I've been involved in, and the understanding that I have of the club officer and executive board roles from my different perspective in student government.
Thank you. Ida?
A few things that I need to work on before becoming president of the union is hopefully learning more and more about the union in order to help people with any issues that they have regarding the union, or so I can answer any questions that people might have, including learning about the clubs that I might not have served as a representative for in the past, so that I know how to effectively place executive board representatives to each club so that they can further budget and help with their programming so that we can ensure that we have successful student groups on campus and to ensure that they can be successful moving into the future.
Thank you. So the next question is, within your whole platform, if there's a single thing you can get done as president of the union, what would it be? Ida, we'll start with you.
Okay, let's see. Got a lot of things on my platform. I guess the one thing that I would start out with that I would love to get done is hiring the new director of the union. The director of the union maintains the whole picture of the union as the years go on. I think it's an integral part, or it's an integral aspect of keeping the large picture of the union that we decide upon continuous. We want to make sure that all the plans that we have, the 5-year plan that we have for facilities, the 20-year plan that we have for facilities, make sure that all the programs that we have on campus continue growing and growing so that students can get the full enjoyment out of them that they need. The director of the union would be able to take the wants and needs of all the current students, as well as what executive board representatives and student government representatives are telling them, and be able to apply that to the future of our union and hopefully keep us moving forward and keep the student vision alive within the union, not only for us, but for the future years.
Thank you. Justin?
So setting aside the things that are going to happen no matter who's elected, things like hiring the director of the union, which will happen no matter who is elected PU, one thing that I think is very important is ensuring that we restore the guarantees that made our union student run for the past 127 years. Part of those are codified and part of those are relational. With the trustee resolution that came out last September, some changes were made. Even though they were called confirmatory, there were some changes that were made. And it's very important to ensure that we can find ways around this to bring back our role, not just in the hiring process, but also in ensuring the job descriptions match what are in the union constitution and the performance management documents match what are described in the constitution, to ensure that the positions in our union respect student governance and the roles of the executive board, the Senate, the president of the union, and the Grand Marshal.
Thank you. So now I have a few candidate-specific questions, so just for one specific candidate. Ida, we'll start with you. Why should voters value your specific e-board experience over Justin's larger, but not as e-board-specific student government experience?
Mm-hmm. So one reason I think that having experience in essentially every single aspect of the executive board is very important is because one of the roles of the president of the union is ensuring that day-to-day operations go smoothly. We need to make sure that everything we're doing here in the union is able to be implemented. Like, it's very easy for us to say all these things in our platforms. Many things will happen no matter who is elected. One of the main things about this is that we need to know how to implement those things. I've served on the Business Operations Committee. We've worked on getting new food options in the McNeil Room. We've worked on getting new facilities. I've worked on the Club Operations Committee, guiding new clubs to start. I was chairwoman of the MAP Committee, which helped implement the new logo that we're going to start implementing that was student-decided and student-designed overall. So knowing how to implement these things and getting these day-to-day operations going is extremely important, and I think that that experience will help me along the way.
Thank you. Justin, you're suggesting some large e-board changes, although you have limited experience within the executive board. How will you convince resident, experienced executive board members that your plans are better than the status quo?
I've actually already been having those conversations. I've met with 4 members of the executive board so far, even prior to producing my platform, and they were very receptive to the ideas. Some of the concerns that they have raised are that they've tried to raise their concerns with the executive board's operations currently, only to be told that they are not problems. And so seeing how we've been able to really reinvigorate the Senate's operations I think will be very beneficial for the executive board as well. And so those executive board members, both current and former, that I've spoken to, have really helped guide me in terms of which of those positive improvements really would be beneficial for the executive board as well. And so I would hope to work with them to help relay those benefits to other board members who may be a little bit more skeptical.
Thank you. And then another question for you, Justin. In the primary debate, the candidates were asked for some of your drawbacks of your leadership style. They mentioned that you were sometimes too forward with your own opinions, and that officers under you weren't always able to form opinions on issues beforehand. Do you feel that these are valid concerns, and if so, how do you plan to address them?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, sure. In the primary debate, the candidates were asked for some drawbacks on your leadership style. They mentioned that sometimes you are too forward with your opinions, and that officers under you were not always able to formulate opinions on issues beforehand. Do you feel that these are valid concerns, and if so, how do you plan to address them?
I do think they're valid concerns, and there's something that I acknowledged when I started my term as Grand Marshal, and there's something that Matt have raised to me as well, the current PU. And I think that there's something that I've definitely worked on and improved upon over this year. A lot of the projects that we've seen come out of the committees were committee founded. I had no part in bringing them. I had no part in giving my opinion on them, and they still came to fruition for the benefit of the students. And so it's been really helpful to have that experience already to be able to build upon and make sure that I'm balancing my opinions with the opinions of the senators and future executive board as well, to ensure that they can also take their own destiny in terms of the projects that they're working on.
Thank you. Ida, in your platform you state that you plan to take a strong stance in support of student rights. How specifically do you plan to do so, and what previous actions give validity to your statement?
Student rights on campus include students having a voice no matter what we're doing in the union. We want to make sure that the union is truly for the students and that students help not only operate but lead essentially every aspect of what we're doing in here. I hope moving forward that we can continue communicating with the administration in order to make sure that the rights that we have are being kept and not taken away, and hopefully improving upon the ones that we've had problems with before. I hope to make sure that students keep their voice by hopefully maintaining monthly meetings with the administration, various cabinet members, as well as interested members of the union moving forward.
All right, so that's all the time we have for moderated questions. As such, we'll be moving on to audience questions. So around here somewhere, they're bringing up a microphone. In terms of how it'll go, feel free to just queue up, ask your questions. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond. And we just ask that if you have a question to ask, please keep it to under 30 seconds in terms of how long the question is. So with that, if anyone has a question, feel free to step up.
So this question is for Justin. On March 23rd, which was 12 days ago, in a private correspondence to me, you apologized for your actions and wrongdoings and your slander of Ida's campaign. In this exchange, you mentioned you were going to be talking to Ida and apologizing to her. Have you done this yet? And if not, are you willing to do it right now?
Sure. So the conversation that Jake is referencing, I went to Acacia the Sunday after spring break. And I remember hearing during Ida's speech, she mentioned that nothing has changed with the union's operations. And I was kind of taken aback by it. And I kind of scoffed, and it was a mistake, and it was not right, and it was not professional. And students, I make mistakes very often, and I'm willing to admit them and grow from them. And that was one that I made, and I thought I've already apologized to it, but just to be sure, Ida, that was not right of me, and I'm truly sorry. And I learned from it, and it won't happen again.
Ida, do you have a response?
Yeah, so thank you for responding right now on stage. Thank you for the question. One of the things I'd like to point out when I was discussing the day-to-day operations of the union, I wanted to state that the day-to-day operations of the union have not changed, nor will they change with future leadership. The outside operations and the things that the executive board does not do on a daily basis, we're working on it. The director of the union hiring process, we're working on it. It is not a day-to-day operation, not even close. We've had 2 directors of the union in previous years. We started out with Rick Hart, and then we had Joe Cassidy. We've hired a director of the union twice. We're still figuring out how we want to continue that process moving into the future, and hopefully we'll have it written down, and we'll have the process that we want to continue to have written down moving forward, and we can work on that next year.
Thank you. Next audience question.
So back in October, like about 2 days before the launch of the Capitol campaign, I think it was Friday the 13th in August, on Wednesday the 10th, the 11th, Dr. Jackson emailed Dr. Jackson's executive assistant emailed the entire members of the E-Board asking to meet between her, the E-Board, and the Grand Marshal and her cabinet. So this happened in a classroom in the Troy building. And then if you've been on Reddit, and I know both of you were also there, so this is really a question for both of you, but how would you say that meeting went? What would you say came out of it? And do you think that, yeah, so that's my question. How would you say that meeting went? And what do you think came out of it?
Thank you. We'll start with Ida.
I think at the very least, that meeting opened up new communication between executive board representatives as well as members of the cabinet. I think it made us a little bit more comfortable speaking to one another and seeing each other, like sitting down right in front of each other, speaking about the issues that we both have and that we've seen around campus. I think it started a good conversation. Do I think we left with any solid solutions? Not so sure about that part. I definitely think that we need to continue having meetings moving forward, but I do think that that was a good start, and I do appreciate them inviting us in as students to speak. In the future, I hope that they can better schedule those meetings so that hopefully they're not at short notice, and that they are not, that they do not conflict with our courses moving forward.
Thank you. Justin?
So I think having meetings with Dr. Jackson and members of the cabinet, no matter what the context or who's involved, I think are very important. But the concern there was we were talking about the hiring process, and the meeting very noticeably did not include the participants in the interviews for the director of the union position up until that point, which was concerning because those were the students who really had the context to talk about why there were concerns with the process thus far. I do think that we had some productive outcomes from that meeting, the ability to have the candidates come back to campus for additional interviews, something that had previously been told no. But I'm not sure if the purpose of the meeting was really to have an honest discussion about the situation or simply to be able to say that we were met with. Because it felt a lot of it was more being told than of a true discussion.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi. I've actually got a quick question for Ida. You actually said, I think it may have been 2 or 3 questions ago, that the day-to-day operations of the union have not changed, nor will they ever change. With keeping that in mind, how do you respond to the fact that the union no longer control or has any real stake in the Archer Center, the fact that we lost the fact that we lost athletics, the fact that the student input was really no longer factored into the same degree in the director of the union hiring process? Do you feel that do you feel that those are not day-to-day changes? And 2, do you think that does that not set a precedent for losing more control and future day-to-day changes?
I guess I'd like to give some background information moving forward. So with the athletics budget, that was one thing that was the executive board no longer budgets the athletics budget. That was after an audit by the NCAA that stated that students cannot budget for themselves. Yes, it was taken away. Administrators, after the audit, came to the executive board, told us it was going to happen. Administrators did not want the athletics budget to be taken away from the union. It did not positively impact athletics. It took money out of the activity fee that was set in a separate budget to impact the athletics budget. Otherwise, the Archer Center was once housed in the union, and the union still continues to fund the Archer Center. However, now it's also a part of academics. It's moved to the to Academy Hall. To, I guess, point on both of those issues on themselves, I definitely think there needed to be better communication in how they were taken away. But I wouldn't actually consider them strong suits in taking student rights away from the union. Those were integral things that needed to happen after an audit and just increases in staffing, things like that. So I guess I'll end it there. I wish I could give more background, but
Next question.
Hi, this is a question for Ida. You stated during your opening statement that you don't think there needs to be any discussion behind closed doors. Everything should be out there in public. Earlier this semester, there was an executive board policy change to their special rules of operation, banning live streaming and recording from any meetings, basically. Also, in the first meeting this was discussed, you said, quote, "We serve as the executive board and have a different purpose and function, and live stream is not necessary to our function." Can you discuss your actual participation in that vote originally for live streaming? I believe it was 15-1-1, and why you might have a change of opinion now that you're running for president of the union?
I wish I could have said that I was at the meeting that the original live streaming motion was discussed. Sadly, I could not be at that meeting. I was absent from that meeting. Do you have anything
Yes, this is a quote from the meeting minutes.
from which date? Are you talking about the meeting where?
It's the last meeting in January when it was first brought up by Anissa. It says so on the website. So they might put the wrong date, but this was from a meeting where you were first discussing it. The resolution was passed on February 8th, so it was 2 meetings
Yes.
before that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was hoping you could just comment on your participation in the vote and why you have a different opinion on the well-called transparency of the executive board now as compared to then.
Due to the confusion, we'll restart the time on that question so you have a chance to respond in full.
Oh, thank you. Sadly, I wasn't able to participate in the vote because, like I said, I wasn't at the meeting when the vote happened in February. That was the one meeting that I was sadly sick for the year. I also didn't, I wasn't able to attend 2 exams that week as well as a quiz. Overall, in holding live streaming, in the past couple meetings, we decided that it's best that each executive board each year decides whether or not they want to live stream and to the extent that they want to. I think moving forward, it's definitely something that we can look into with hopefully the participation of RPI TV. We need to make sure that whenever we do live stream in the future that it is ADA compliant because every single thing that we upload to the union website from now on needs to fit disability requirements, have closed captioning, and things like that. So we want to make sure that all those requirements are able to be met before we start instituting live streaming.
I have a rebuttal to that.
Sure.
When live streaming, we don't actually, so the ADA thing that's brought up, Matt investigated whether or not we need to have a closed captioning. We actually don't. We need just to have a transcript of the meeting. But in my meetings with VP Cook, or Secretary Cook, he made it clear that it's really not a priority to have these meetings be closed captioned. There are more important matters that need to be handled before we can begin discussing this concern. So in the meantime, we would be able to go ahead with recording and live streaming.
Ida, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, the administrator that you're referring to, I believe, also stated that he wasn't exactly entirely sure why the e-board was approaching him on this issue to begin with, considering that he doesn't exactly know every single policy behind the union and what we do, as well as the union website. So I think that might just be something that we need to look more into.
All right, thank you. Next audience question.
So my name's Paul, and for the sake of clarity, I'm one of Ida's campaign assistants, and I have 2 questions for each candidate. The first is, can you talk about the experience that you have with operating budgets, creating them, and working with them? And the second is, would you be willing to disclose which questions tonight were asked by members of your campaign staff?
So we'll start with Justin on that.
So do I have, before you start the time, do I have 1 minute?
Let's do 1 minute for each of the 2 questions.
So we'll start with the one about budgeting first.
Yes.
So I've worked with operational budgets in that I was business manager for RPI TV. So I was able to work with one of the largest club budgets that we have on campus for a service organization. That was almost a year and a half ago. But I also have spent the past 3 summers working for CISO, where I am involved in their commerce IT's budgeting software. We use it once per fiscal quarter to manage about $160 million in operational money. So in order to build that application from scratch, we had to understand the budgeting process from start to finish, the different pieces that go into the budget. Obviously, it's a different budgeting process than what we use here, but we learned a lot about areas of efficiency and how budgets are made, especially when funds are tight between different teams.
Sure. And then also 1 minute for the questions from campaign assistants.
Sure. I saw David come up. He's a campaign assistant, and I saw Brian come up. I think those are it. I don't think I heard anyone else from my campaign assistants.
Thank you. Ida, your turn for the 2 questions.
Yeah, so the first to start off with my budgeting experience. I've spent most of my undergraduate career on the executive board. I got to serve as the e-board representative for service organizations, as well as the executive board representative for various special interest and hobby clubs that we have on campus. That means that I got to sit down with each one of these clubs. I guess just for more transparency, each executive board representative is assigned between 4 to 8 clubs. This consists with sitting down and having multiple one-on-one meetings with those clubs, seeing the programs and activities they have for the year and various improvements that they want to make. Other than that, I've sat through the entire e-board budgeting process for multiple years now, going through every single budget. This is a full day. It goes through the entire weekend budgeting for the union, as well as sitting on the union annual report committee, which compiled the finances for the union for the entire year, eventually putting out a report that's currently on the union finances page.
And then the question about campaign assistants.
I think the only one that's come up is Paul. I see Sierra in line.
We have time for 2 more audience questions, so the next person, feel free.
Hannah's one of my campaign assistants too. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Justin. So my question is for both candidates. The e-board has been known to be emotionally charged, and some members have even shed tears in multiple meetings. How do you plan to make the board more professional and essentially more productive?
We'll start with Ida.
As a member of the executive board, I'm sorry to hear that members have cried during meetings. I think I've only been in 1 meeting where that's happened, and it was after a terrible comment happened that was attacking a specific member of the executive board. I thought that was that specific attack on that executive board representative was entirely inappropriate and uncalled for in that meeting. I haven't seen any other members cry in meetings during the year. To continue a non-emotionally charged board, I think all the executive board representatives can say that as much as people want to say that there's no bias involved in making decisions, I think we all know that everyone who makes a decision has some sort of bias in their mind. Every single decision made by anyone ever usually has bias. Other than that, in the decisions that we have made throughout the year, I like to say that to keep them less emotionally charged, we can continue asking conflicts of interest to leave the room to make sure that the bias is at a lower level.
Thank you. Justin?
So I think that there's definitely nothing wrong with showing emotion, and I think if anything, it shows that these people really do care about the union. But it's also very important, even though there are biases in every decision of every human ever, it's very important to ensure that we first and foremost prioritize and ask ourselves the questions that whether or not this is good for the union, whether or not this is good for the student body, and then try to the best of our ability to set aside personal feelings or personal opinions out of the decisions. I've seen that with the actions taken against RPI-TV and the Outing Club. I've seen that in the approval of the UPAC chair. I've seen that in other decisions as well, and it's very important to ensure that we take the emotion out of the decision and focus on the facts and the figures and the situation at hand, not our personal opinions on the situation at hand.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi. My question's for both candidates. As student government members, you both have had the opportunity to go on numerous student professional development activities. Which of these do you like that the union has sponsored for the student government members, and how would you like to expand or scale back on those for both student government and for the wider members of the union?
So we'll start with Justin on that.
So I actually had so first, the only one that I've attended so far is the Region 8 ACUI Conference, Association for College Unions International, which was held at UMass Boston. It was really great. I watched, I had a really great presentation on how to support special interest groups, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. It was put on by the University of Essex in the UK. But I know I had conversations with VP for Student Life, Frank Ross, back when he was still here, about potentially having students be participating in the NASPA conference, which is for student professionals, because we have students that really do play almost professional-like roles in our union and should continue to do so. I think that could also be another potential opportunity for us to pursue. Obviously, we do need to be respectful of cost, and there are resources that we can find online So we need to kind of balance the resources and the cost.
Thank you. We have time for one more audience question. If
Can
there's-
I answer?
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Feel free.
Right. So as far as union-sponsored trips, I've also had the opportunity to attend ACUI, Association of College Unions International, for the past 2 years, first at UMass Lowell, and then at UMass Boston. However, after hearing several grievances and possible improvements that can be made to the union, including transparency and communication between the executive board, the Senate, and different bodies of student government, I think one thing that we can continue to improve upon is the trainings that we hold at the beginning of the year that have the executive board in them. We set our goals for the year. I think it would be extremely beneficial to also include the Senate in on these conversations when we hold these leadership trainings with the Archer Center, to get to know each other, get to know how our respective student government organizations operate, and hopefully improve on these different things that have been brought forth tonight and through the various clubs that I've been talking to and visiting.
Thank you.
All right, I have a question to continue to follow up on the live streaming questions for Ida. So what is your opinion on live streaming, and how does the fact that each e-board can choose whether or not to live stream, how does that fit into your transparency policy?
Can you repeat the second part of that again?
Yeah, how does each e-board being able to choose whether or not they live stream, how does that fit into your transparency policy?
Mm-hmm. So as executive board representatives, not only do we get to represent different parts of the student body and how money is spent in the union, but also our clubs. Whenever we make these decisions, we like to make decisions as a board, so that opinion would differ year to year. That's a new thing. Normally, the executive board makes decisions based on historical data. Moving forward, we'd like to switch that for live streaming, and we can choose that year by year. Next year, maybe the executive board will choose to live stream, but we are definitely going to continue investigating that and seeing how we can do that in the most proper way possible in order to make it happen, because it's clear that that's what the student body wants to see, and that's what we make sure that we want to do. We want to make sure that we put students first.
Thank you. So with that, that'll be the end of the audience question section. For the last bit, I'll allow each of the two candidates to give a 1-minute closing statement. Justin, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to our answers and asking such great questions. I'm here because I really do believe that I can provide something beneficial to the union as president of the union. And if you agree with that, I really hope you could consider voting for me. But the ultimate objective here is to provide a benefit to the union and to ensure that our union has a viable future moving forward. And I'm very excited to see what we have tomorrow and moving forward, and I'm looking forward to being involved in the union no matter the outcome of the election. Thank you.
Thank you. Ida?
All right, thank you to everyone who came out tonight to hear us speak and to hear us speak more on our platforms. Throughout my several years serving on the executive board, I got the honor of serving as secretary as well as working with many clubs, and I really hope that you can let me continue upon these experiences and let me show you how I can further implement the things in our platforms that will happen whether or not, that will happen no matter who is elected. And I hope that you'll let me use these skills that I've developed over the years to implement the things that we want to see in the union, so we can continue seeing a sustainable student-governed, student-led and self-governed union, so that we can continue to have a successful future where we put students first. And I hope that you'll consider voting for me tomorrow in the elections. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. If we could give a round of applause for our candidates. So with that, that'll conclude the President of the Union debate. Once again, I'd like to wish our candidates the best of luck. Justin, Ida, best of luck tomorrow. We'll take a short break, and then we'll pick up with the GM debate.
You brought shame to the family.
Oh, thanks, guys.
So there we go. That's service right there. He was waiting for the pour.
Can I take the mug? Excellent.
Oh, okay. Now I just feel I should have on already.
All right, that's your laptop?
That is my laptop. Do you have your laptop?
It was weird because no one knew
Then I get to yell. And I get to yell. That's more fun.
Just deep.
It's on. Oh, I love myself and hate myself at the same time. It's okay.
Closing, just go over the gym week events and other paraphernalia.
Cool.
Don't worry, you got this.
Okay, and we're back, I guess. Hi, my name is John Parent. I'll be moderating the GM section of this debate. And congratulations to both our candidates for making it through the primaries. Great job, guys. Also, congratulations to the Moose for a great campaign. I'm pretty sure you're here. Okay, so I'm a member of the debate team, and we're hosting this event. Thank you again to UPAC Lights, Sound, the GM Week Committee, and everyone who's helped put this event together. It was super great and well run. As a reminder to our candidates and the audience, the times will be a 2-minute opener for each candidate, and then a 1-minute response to each question after that. 30-second rebuttals if either of you want to rebut a statement made by your opponent or a question, and then a 1-minute closing statement. And just a note to audience questions, if you're a staffer of one of the candidates, please tell me or announce it before you ask your question, just for disclosure reasons. Yeah, so if we want to start with opening statements, Steph?
Sure. First off, thank you all for being here. Hi, everyone. My name is Steph. I'm a fourth-year architecture major, minoring in sustainability studies and business marketing, and I'm running to be your next Grand Marshal. So I'm running to be your next Grand Marshal because I believe that the union is facing extremely troubling times, and we need a strong leader. I am that strong leader. My platform focuses on a few different points, all of which I think are completely attainable, but some of which involve student rights, inclusivity and diversity, and a student-run union. So with student rights, as Grand Marshal, it should always be paramount to be advocating for students and students only, never on your own accord. So in terms of inclusivity and diversity, I believe that we haven't been doing a good enough job to allow the opportunity to students and other organizations to voice their opinion more freely. And in terms of a student-run union, it's really sad that this year is the first year that we don't officially have a student-run union. It's been 127 years of a student-run union, and it's enabled past students a slew of different opportunities. And I think that if elected Grand Marshal, that would be my priority. We need our student-run union. It's what makes us unique.
And Nancy?
Hello, everyone. Also, thank you for being here. My name's Nancy Bush. I'm a junior chemistry and sustainability studies dual major, minoring in environmental science. I've been a senator for 3 years now, serving on between 6 and 7 Senate committees, and then also a member of an executive board committee for 1.5 years, so I have that unique experience. I'm also a captain of the women's ultimate frisbee team, and I'm very involved in my class council. I think that this wide experience would make me a great GM, and it's why I'm running. I'm a very passionate and dedicated student representative, and I think that shows from my 3 years of tenure on the Senate, the way I've voted and the way I've represented my constituents. My platform runs on 4 points: sustainability, open communication, connectedness, diversity. I hope to elaborate on those throughout the debate, but basically for sustainability, creating a network for students so that I can be a voice for them to administrators. That kind of connects to open communication, I hope across all 5 bodies, but also between the students and administration to have that open communication so that we can have these tough decisions. For example, as Steph mentioned, our union is not student run anymore, and that's a tough conversation, and we need that open communication to be able to fix that. Connectedness, again, across all bodies of the union, and then for diversity, I don't believe there's enough diversity in the Senate, and I hope to be able to fix that if elected.
Thank you to both candidates. So now for the moderated questions section. My first question for both candidates, but we're going to start with Nancy, is what do you feel the single most important aspect of your platform is?
I think the single most important aspect of my platform is the part where I discuss my relationship with administration and the ways that I plan to bridge the gap between the student distrust of administration and the administrators. I have a very, as I mentioned, unique network of experience working with administrators, and I believe that the way to get there is through stepping stones. So instead of, when we get to these areas where they're gray and where it seems like we're butting heads, we can slowly mend that gap through common denominators that we believe in. So, for example, bike sharing is what we're working on right now. I'm working with the Vice President of Administration. We both believe that that's great for campus, and so we can agree on that so we can create that respectful relationship and then continue it on into those harder discussions. And I believe that I'm the best person to be able to do that. And that's my...
Thank you. And Steph?
So as I do agree with all of that, I think that it's paramount to be worried about the students and their interests, not only what the administrators are thinking of the ideas that you're coming to them with. So that's why I actually want to bring up 2 points of my platform, a student-run union and student rights. Our student-run union, or prior student-run union, it really has turned out great alum, and you can see that through their success. We used to be the only student-run union on the East Coast, and it's sad that we aren't. So I definitely want to make sure that moving forward, we're standing strong to administration and we're making sure that we regain that student-run aspect of our unique union.
Thank you. And to Steph again, so what steps would you take toward making sure this union is student-run in the future?
So I think that starts with conversation with the administration. Obviously, we would need to stand firm and strong in our beliefs because I think that it has been kind of a battle. The relationship with administration right now is civil but uncomfortable. I think that constant communication, setting up monthly meetings, not only with the Grand Marshal and the administration, but also with the committee chairs and other outside students that are interested in voicing their opinion and being involved in the conversation. I think it all really stems from good conversation, good meaningful conversation, not just being in a room and sitting next to each other.
Okay. Thank you. So our next question is, international students frequently feel left out of student government, and so how would you remedy this situation and better integrate international students and their opinions into Senate? Start with Nancy.
So mentioned in my platform, in terms of diversity, right now the executive board is creating a multicultural leadership council, and they're making a standing committee for them on the executive board. That's very operational, as it is important, but the Senate deals with more project-based things. So students come to us with their passionate ideas, and we help to foster those, give them resources that they need to make them happen. I believe that committees are the heart of the Senate. They're what really change students' lives on a day-to-day basis. You might not necessarily see what I do on a day-to-day basis, but you'll see what the committees do. And so to help give international students a greater voice on the Senate, I hope to create a multicultural or diversity committee, and then hopefully have an international student subcommittee of that, so that international students can really voice their opinions and have the resources that they need to make the changes that they want to see on campus.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I do agree that international students aren't well represented within the Student Senate and on campus right now. I strongly believe in inclusivity, and I even mentioned that in my platform on numerous different points. So some things that I hope to do to encourage involvement by international students and also to give them more of a voice. One would be creating a subcommittee within the Student Life Committee that focuses on these multicultural or international students that need their voice better spoken for, but also they need those resources. So I want to make sure that they also have those resources. Another thing that I want to do is create a Google Doc, an easy Google Doc, where I would send it out to whoever wants it, and they can schedule a meeting with the Grand Marshal. And so that's a one-on-one interaction where you could really gauge exactly what their interests are and what they need.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, both of you mentioned standing strong in the face of the administration pretty frequently, both in your platforms and in the short time of this debate. Can you go into exactly what that means, starting with Nancy?
So I think what standing firm and strong with administration means is that there's going to be tough situations where student rights are what we believe to be the students' rights and what administrators believe to be the student rights, they're not going to be the same. And I've been dealing with this on the Senate since I was a freshman, and I've definitely grown in the ways that I have dealt with this because I've been dealing with it for so long. And I believe that standing firm now means having those respectful but tough conversations and really standing firm in those meetings, saying, you know, if an administrator says something that students don't believe in, not just agreeing with them or backing down in defeat, but saying, no, this is really what students need, and I think that we need to continue this conversation. I've done that with constitutional amendment discussions. I've done that discussing union issues, and I hope to continue that experience if elected Grand Marshal.
And Steph?
Where I do think that all of that is important, I think it is super important to have evidence. When coming to a meeting with administration, you don't just want to say, oh, the students want this. You want to be able to say, this is how I know the students want this. They said it in the student survey. I know this, this, and that. This is exactly what they want. And standing firm, it's kind of the job as the Grand Marshal to really advocate for the collective right of the students. So I don't plan on wavering on doing that anytime soon. I really think that it's candid conversations, but it's also standing your ground, making sure the administration knows that, no, it's not okay if you make this decision and decide to tell the student body 2 weeks later.
Okay. Thank you to both. Our next question is, how will you better publicize Senate meetings, minutes, and opportunities, and students' rights issues to the general student body, starting with Steph?
So as a chairperson of the Student Government Communications Committee, something that we've been working on has been the monthly report. So I think this is a great way to show students who aren't necessarily involved, like, hey, this is what student government has been working on. And there's actually a bunch of different templates that me and my committee have worked on to create a more palatable way to communicate with the student body. But on top of that, I want to make sure that people are informed and they know where to go to participate in projects that they're interested in. So something that I do also want to do is give the committee chairs an opportunity to have their own booth at the activity fair. This way, it's a one-on-one interaction with different students, and you could solicit right there, and they know right then and there what projects you're working on, what you hope to do, and they might become a part because they feel passionately about it.
Thank you. And Nancy?
So I believe that the Senate did a really good job of this by basically revamping the Student Government Communications Committee, which Steph chaired, and she did an amazing job of really getting word out to students, and I want to continue in that effort. We really utilized social media a lot this year, which I think helped, but I think it's not always the best way, so I hope to expand beyond that, but also continue to push that. We also started live streaming, which I think is great, but I think a lot of students aren't going to sit through watching a 2-hour-long meeting and they don't necessarily know where the important parts are or anything like that. So I hope to extend our efforts in live streaming to be able to create little highlight videos for important votes and things like that so students can watch a quick video and know everything they need to know about the Senate that happened that week. I also plan to invite more students to the meetings. I know that sometimes students don't even know when they're happening, and I know that one of the past platforms of Justin was to invite maybe athletics or students from various parts of campus to come to the meetings, and I would hope to continue that to get their voices involved in the meetings as well.
Thank you to both. So for our next, it's more of a statement. So how would you rate the effectiveness of last year's Senate, starting with Nancy?
I would rate the effectiveness of last year's Senate as very effective and as the most effective that I've seen in the past 3 years while serving on the Senate. This year, we really put a focus on committees, which I mentioned before really are, I think, the most important part of the Senate. We picked cabinet members that were really passionate and knew their jobs and were responsible and professional. And they worked with administrators closely and also with their constituents and with students to get projects done in a timely manner and to get to better make a campus for all students across the board. And so I think that we did really well with that. And then also making the meetings more professional and efficient. We did not have a lot of 3-hour-long meetings, and that could not be said for a lot of the past senates.
Thank you. Steph?
So Nancy did mention one part that made it extremely efficient, and that's the subcommittee structure. So the subcommittee structure would basically be, it was a chair, and then within that committee, you have different subcommittees which would focus on different projects. So this really amps up the amount of work that a committee can produce. So I think that really added to the efficiency, but if I were to critique it a little bit, I think that's something that would make it even more efficient, would be posting those hot button topics earlier to the Senate. This way, the senators and chair people would have the chance to actually deliberate and talk about it and really think about their opinions, while also being able to voice those to the fellow senators.
Thank you. And kind of following off that last question, what would you say were the biggest successes and or failures of last year's Senate, starting with you, Steph?
So one of the biggest successes, I think that really goes in with efficiency. We really did follow parliamentary procedure, and I think that made meetings extremely efficient. We were able to talk more about hot button topics, but if I were to say if there was one downside of it, I think that we could definitely have more diversity within student government, or, well, actually student government as a whole, but specifically in the Senate. Inviting more Greeks into the conversation, inviting more athletes into the conversation, inviting different groups that aren't necessarily well represented.
Thank you. And Nancy?
So I think one of the biggest successes of the Senate this year, quoting a tenured senator, Steve Spraza, the Senate has frequently ran on salt in the past years. We frequently were kind of internally having discussions that ran longer and really affected our ability to fight for students as a whole. And so I think this year we had an internal reforms committee where we looked at ourselves and we said, how can we change ourselves to create a more efficient and effective Senate for the students? And we did that. And together we stood for student rights rather than worrying about what the other one was doing. And so I think I want to continue that as that was one of the greatest successes. And then one of the downfalls, I believe, was a lot of projects were lost in a few of the committees that I feel like maybe shouldn't have been. I would hope to get more frequent updates from the committees on all of their projects that they're working on so that we don't lose important projects that students really want, and to create a continuity between each Senate.
Okay, thank you to both. Our next question is, so how would you convince the majority of the student body that the Student Senate is both important and has like a relevant voice on really anything? Starting with Steph.
So I think to stress its importance, you could simply just explain all the great things that it's done. Bringing up the handbook, I hope to have a handbook endorsement, or approval rather than endorsement in the future, but that handbook really does outline all the rules and regulations that are put on students. The Senate has a voice in that. So I feel like that's extremely powerful on its own.
Okay, and Nancy?
I would like to agree with Steph on that. We have a lot of important conversations behind the scenes that a lot of students may not know about, but they are making a difference, and we are making a change, and we are increasing the rights of students by being that representative to administration. And that is incredibly important, and I don't think we would be where we were today without the representatives of the students that are always fighting for your voice. I think another part to talk about is also the committees within student government. I mean, I mentioned this before, but there are day-to-day things that students may not even know were worked on by students and that were put there by students. So I think that maybe we should be doing a better job of communicating that, but I think that there are really important things that are going on that you may not even notice, but they definitely are students working hard on it, and that's what your student government does for you.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, the two of you have a lot of similarities in your platforms, but what is the main area that you feel sets you apart from your opponent? We'll start with Steph.
So I think what really sets me apart is that I have a comprehensive plan to stand up for student rights in our student-run union. I really think that our student rights and student union are what are important right now, whereas other aspects of what could be worked on are noble. I think I really do focus on my platform of things that we really desperately need this year. And I also think that everything on my platform is completely attainable, and I wouldn't promise anything on there that I didn't think I could achieve.
And Nancy.
I would also like to say that while I tried to widen my platform to include a lot of things, a student-run union is something that is very important to me. And I believe, obviously, Steph has said the same thing, but one thing that separates me is that in terms of diversity, I really believe that we should be looking further than just maybe adding something to the Student Life Committee, because I think that it is a really difficult topic right now in the Senate. We don't have enough diversity, and to increase that is so important. I believe we should have our own committee. I believe we should have a sister committee to the executive board so that they can be working together, working on projects, using those resources that the Senate can offer them, so that the students do feel represented on this campus.
Thank you. And now a question for Nancy. A lot of your campaign and your platform is about inclusiveness and diversity. So how do you plan to expand the scope and awareness of student government for underrepresented minorities not already involved in Senate?
So I definitely plan to hold mini information sessions or discuss and reach out to the multicultural clubs on campus. That will also include international student clubs on campus, to just kind of explain what we do on the Senate and what we can do for them if they decide to join. A lot of times the committee really only is about an hour commitment a week, maybe a few more if you do pick up a project that you're passionate about. And I think a lot of students don't know that, and they think that it would take a lot of effort to make change. So I plan to go out and really explain to students and help them learn the changes that they could make and how they could help.
Thank you. Question for both candidates. So actually, you both talked a lot about Save the Union in your platforms, and you both mentioned it and like what you think is important about this debate and what sets you apart. And then you also mentioned a lot of tension between the administration and the students and the student body. So what would you do specifically to kind of alleviate and work through that tension, Nancy?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of it?
Sorry, what would you do to basically work through the tension between the administration and the student body?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Sorry. What would you do specifically to work through the tension that's between the administration and the students? Yeah.
So I mentioned this before, but I do think, although it's kind of maybe a long-term approach to it, stepping stones are going to be important. And so I think going into the room and being firm with administrators is by far the best thing that's going to happen, but not increasing that tension, so therefore being respectful also. Understanding where both sides are coming from, I think, is important. It's a nuanced view. Standing firm for student rights, obviously, but not ruining those relationships before they've even happened, because if we cut those relationships loose, then we won't have a say at all, and I think that would be even more dire than where we are now. So creating those stepping stones with administrators and with the cabinet of the Senate, with senators themselves, inviting those administrators to the Senate meetings so we can have open and candid discussions. We did that with Student Life this year. I believe we could do it with more members of the administration to really get those conversations going and to relieve that tension.
Thank you. And Steph?
So what I hope to do is, I've mentioned it earlier, is have continual conversations, maybe monthly, maybe biweekly, with administration. But what I want to do on top of that is to create a more robust liaison network. So facility services, Student Life Committee, and a few other committees on the Student Senate have gotten the opportunity to work with administrators one-on-one. And this is where they were really able to progress their projects and also voice the student opinion. So I feel like if we created a more robust liaison system where every single committee has a corresponding member of administration, or even a few corresponding members of administration, that's where we're going to get the most productive talk, and that's also where we're going to be able to stand up for the student opinion and have those candid conversations that I think are vital and will really foster a better relationship between the administration and the student body.
Thank you. And now a question for both of you again. What sets you apart, or what do you think, in your opinion, sets you apart from our current GM and our current leadership style? Starting with Steph.
So I think what sets me apart, actually I'm going to start with what we have similar. I think we're both very open to inclusivity. It's something that both Justin and I have pushed before in the past, and I plan to push in the future. If there was something that set me apart, I believe that I'm able to see not the bigger picture better, but not get distracted by little things, which in this case, not so little. I felt that the Grand Marshal, as passionate as he was, he did get a little stuck on the idea of having to really, not that it was a bad thing that he was telling the students everything that was going on with the Save the Union and the lack of our student-run union, but it kind of took his attention away from other committees and other programs that they could be doing and other initiatives that they could be working on. So I think that I'm able to manage both huge issues, but also still keep focus on what the committees are working on and to keep progressing that.
Okay, just to follow up there. So how would you specifically ensure that balance between big things like Save the Union and littler projects that still have big impact on the campus?
Mm-hmm. So I think a lot happens both behind closed doors and within meetings. Cabinet meetings and Senate meetings, I think everything should be focused on the progression of the different committees in order to get those projects out that students really need. But behind closed doors, or not so closed doors because the student body should always know what's going on, that's when the Grand Marshal should be worried about those big issues. And that's also when they should be reaching out to the student body and making sure that they're keeping the student body in mind and well representing them and always getting their feedback.
Okay, thank you. And Nancy, what sets you apart from our current GM/leadership in Senate?
So I'll again start with the leadership style kind of question. And I think that where we're similar, I think that Justin and I both like to lead by example during meetings. He believed that passion is contagious, and so do I. I really do believe that one student on this campus can make a difference if they have enough passion and if they know where to concentrate that. And I hope that as GM, I would be able to help lead them in that direction to make a change on campus. I believe what separates me is that I have the ability to separate my own opinions from what I'm going to say about my constituents during the Senate meetings. I believe that sometimes there were instances where the past GM kind of felt like something had to go a certain way and that he was nervous whether or not the Senate would vote a certain way. And so he would try and make it happen specifically. And I don't think that that's correct in some cases. So I think that I would be able to separate myself from that and just let the Senate deal with what they're going to deal with on their own.
Okay, thank you both. One more question is, so this is the position of Grand Marshal is incredibly time consuming. So how would you make sure that you have enough time in your schedule each week to properly and effectively execute the office of Grand Marshal, starting with Nancy?
So ever since my freshman year being on the Senate, I've also been on the Frisbee team and involved in many other things on campus, and I've never really let that overwhelm me. I've always been able to serve on all of these things equally and with as much I can give to each one. If elected GM, that will be my top priority. I will be in the sustainability studies part of my dual major, so it will be a lot more Haas courses, a lot less academic time spent in lab, so that will be helpful. And also, I will not be the captain of my Frisbee team next semester, so while I will still have commitments, they will be much less. And I plan to put my wholehearted effort, other than my academics, into this position.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I've gotten this question a lot, mainly because I'm an architecture major and there's a stigma around it. But I've been involved in a lot of things on campus simultaneously, and I think that's really taught me a great sense of time management. And I think that's one of my greatest assets, honestly. I did prepare to be Grand Marshal, hopefully, and I did arrange my schedule accordingly. Again, I would make Grand Marshal my biggest priority because at the end of the day, the students would be my biggest priority. So I hope you all don't think that architecture is going to hold me back. I arranged everything so that I could put my full focus on Grand Marshal and the student body.
Okay. Thank you to both. And one final question before we enter our audience question phase is, what is the first major project or significant impact you want to have on the campus if elected Grand Marshal? Start with Nancy.
So one of the things I think is there are a few projects that have been going on within Senate committees that have maybe been lost or caught up in a few bureaucratic processes. that it's kind of sad that they haven't been passed yet, and I really want to see them get passed. So one of my main things that I want to get passed first would be the SOAP proposal, which is a replacement of the SPAM proposal of we're dealing with Greek life on campus. It's been in the works for over a year now, and I think that a lot of that does have to do with administrative discussions, but I would like to definitely see that get passed as one of the first things if elected Grand Marshal.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I think the first thing when I get into office, hopefully, would be sending out an email to the administration about how the director of the union search is unacceptable. Students should be involved in every step of the process, and the Human Resources Interview Committee should have full say over questions that are asked during and involved in every step of the way. But there are also other things that I hope to achieve within the first term or first semester of my term, and that would be addressing summer arts issues because there are obviously quite a few. Also, getting the Preferred Names Project back into the works because that's actually been sitting idle for about 2.5, 3 years, which I think is completely unacceptable. As well as encouraging the pilot program that Academic Affairs Committee Academic Affairs Committee is working on a pilot program for online tutoring, which I think would be fantastic for students. So I also want to get that in the works as well.
Thank you to both. I think we're going to open up to audience questions now. So if you want to form a line behind me. And just as a reminder, if you're part of either campaign, please disclose that. Okay.
So I'm a campaign assistant for Steph, but this is a question for both of you. So during this past year, Justin has very publicly stated on Reddit and via email that he has been subject of expulsion threats by the administration for explaining what he believes, for basically telling administrators what he believes and how he feels that he's advocating for students. So if similar actions were to happen to both of you, how would you handle it?
Start with Nancy.
So I believe that while those must be incredibly terrifying, and I know that Justin did deal with that for a while, I would treat them as what they are, and that is just threats. I believe that would probably mean that means we're getting to a part in the discussion where they realize that they're kind of losing, I guess, in terms of student rights, where they have to go that far as to threaten to expel someone without any reason. And so I plan to stay strong through that and continue in my efforts until, I guess, they prove that it's more than just an empty threat.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I do agree that poses an extremely stressful situation, as it would of the people who were under judicial review for the protest. I think that it's an unfair situation for the administration to be putting students in, especially when we're under such a difficult course load. So in my personal opinion, I feel that reaching out directly and asking for a one-on-one meeting with whoever had threatened that expulsion is the best route.
Thank you.
I guess this is a question more directed for Steph, since you've talked about wanting to have monthly meetings with the administration. The administration has said in the past that they don't think that monthly meetings would be very effective and they don't think they're very necessary. I was wondering if you could say why you think they are necessary and what you would be talking about during those meetings to make them more productive and convince the administration to have these meetings.
So, I definitely disagree that it wouldn't be productive. Recently, we had a few members of administration come into the Student Senate and present the things that they've been working on, and that really opened up the conversation. And I think those kind of opportunities where students could be voicing their opinions, but also the administration is giving them instant feedback, it's always beneficial. So as long as the conversation that's being had is meaningful and isn't being lost, I think there's no harm in having monthly meetings. Honestly, I think it would be a huge benefit, and it would resolve a lot of issues that we're having with miscommunication between the administration and student government.
Thanks.
This is a question for both of you. You've touched on how you want to fix underrepresented student issues in the past, but can you say what students you feel are underrepresented and why that's the case now, like how it got to this point?
Okay, I think we'll start with Steph on this one.
So I'm going to actually start with a story. So I'm a union photographer, and I went to a BSA alumni panel, and within that panel, students, our peers, were speaking about how they would hear slurs walking to class, or how the multicultural lounge is kind of gross. And I've honestly never felt so passionate about something that really didn't have much to do with me. So I feel like making those conversations more frequent, giving, again, I said a Google Doc earlier, I think that should always be available to all organizations so that if they do have issues, they could contact the Grand Marshal directly. I think that there's a lot that we're not doing for underrepresented students.
Thanks. And Nancy?
So I mentioned this within my platform, but I think that in terms of the types of students, international students and the multicultural students, as Steph mentioned, the Multicultural Lounge is there for those students, but it's kind of gross, as she mentioned. And so hopefully by the e-board creating an operational standing multicultural leadership council, that will help that, but I just think that there are other projects that we could be pursuing. If the Multicultural Lounge is gross, I'm sure there's other parts of campus that aren't necessarily working for those students and with those students, and I want to change that. In terms of international students, just during the primary, a student came up and said that due to the lack or the shortening of the winter break, he might not even know where to live during that time because it's too short to go home. And I think that those problems are awful, and it's something that maybe, again, I don't even have to think about that. So I think that by representing those better on the Senate, they'll feel more heard.
Thank you to both.
Hi, so character has been a central question of this campaign. Do you think it's possible to separate who we are and our actions in private? And how will you represent the student body with that?
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Nancy this time.
So I guess I'll start by, not really a story, but kind of an anecdote of being transparent. I am on the Frisbee team, and Frisbee culture is very strange. And when I go into a Senate meeting, I am completely separate of myself. For example, my Frisbee friends that have been helping me with this campaign, they kind of don't even know who I am within the Senate. Not that I'm a different person entirely, but I have a level of professionalism and a level of disconnect from my own opinions and my own kind of background and that of my constituents' opinions and my constituents' voices. And I think that I've shown that throughout my 3 years on the Senate. My voting record shows that I've never kind of let those things affect how I represent those students. So I do believe that you can disconnect those things.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I'll start by saying that who I am behind closed doors is the same exact person I am out in public. I personally believe that professionalism isn't just something you exude in a public situation, but it should be always. And so I try to be as professional as possible in every single situation I'm put in, and I hope that shows.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I'm a candidate assistant for Steph, but my question is for both candidates. As you know, approximately 30% of this campus is Greek, but neither of you are members of Greek organizations. Can you elaborate on how you're going to make sure that the needs and wants of that community is going to be brought forward in your time as GM?
Thank you. Nancy, you want to start?
So as Hannah mentioned, I am not Greek, but I do think that the Greek community on campus the positives that it gives to campus is immeasurable. And I visited many Greek houses over the course of my campaign, and I'm also friends with many people within the Greek community. And I frequently see the amazing things that they're doing for both charities across the world, within our community, and on campus. And I think that the attacks that have happened on the Greek community and the gray area that they're kind of feeling is unacceptable, and that they should feel safe on this campus just like every other student and organization do. And so I do believe to fight for the rights of the Greek community. I think that the fact that the Greek community has been serving on the Student Life Committee for certain projects is great, but I don't think that it should stop with that one project. I believe that they should continue and we should recruit more students to be a part of these committees so that they can really get their projects and their voices represented.
Thank you. And Steph?
So when I was a freshman, Greek life was basically the pulse at RPI, and unfortunately it's kind of dwindled since then. I really do intend to stand up for Greek rights. And some things that I hope to do, Nancy had mentioned earlier, the SOAP proposal. I really do want to see that come to completion, and that would obviously be a collaboration between IFC and student government, because right now IFC is working on it mainly. But on top of that, I think there's really been a lot of missteps in terms of repercussions for Greek life, including Good Samaritan policy right now. It really does affect Greek life because it doesn't protect organizations where it should. Mandatory minimum sanctions, it's kind of an umbrella effect. We're not using the J board like we should be. Mandatory minimum sanctions, it's basically like a blanket effect. If there's one alcohol infraction, an organization is suspended for 2 semesters. I think that's ridiculous. So I want to bring Greek rights back into the union and make sure that every organization, every house, every sorority is being fairly treated, and it's not just an umbrella effect.
Thank you. Next question.
I have a question for both candidates. Is that I feel like one of the major issues with the international student not participating in the running of the union and all stuff is that they're not motivated through the union can actually make an effect on their they can improve their life at Rensselaer. So as Grand Marshal, as the representative of the student body, how are you preparing to review the you can make a difference upon their life at Rensselaer, and how would you show the student union is actually doing something for them, and how would you represent the difference you've made through the student body and your work to them?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Steph?
Would you actually mind repeating the middle part of your question for me?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry about that.
I don't really know what middle part of it.
You had talked about what, as Grand Marshal, we would be doing to...
how would you reveal, you can make their life different at Rensselaer? How would you to show, the improvement you've made upon their lives?
Okay. So, obviously, I'm not an international student. So, I believe that it really starts with the conversation. There needs to be more communication between groups like international students and not just student government, but specifically the Grand Marshal. Because if we don't know what international students or any other group need, there's no way we could possibly advocate for it. So again, with the Google Doc, I hope to be able to visit as many different organizations as possible so that I know what students are thinking, so that I could actually address them within the Senate.
Thank you. And Nancy?
I definitely agree with Steph in terms of getting international students involved, visiting the clubs and communities where they are on campus so that we can actually hear their voices and hear what they have to say about the union and about the projects that they want to see. I think that could also be done in the form of mini info sessions, like I said, discussing how student government can work for them and will work for them if they decide to join, and the many different facets of it and how they can join. I also would like to see those projects be moved on into the committees of the Senate. As the Grand Marshal, I do plan to advocate for those projects, but I think that I can't do it all alone. And so I would love to see my cabinet also get involved in going out to different clubs and organizations to really discuss with them what they want to see be done in terms of projects within those committees. So our committees are really working for the students to get those projects handled.
Thank you to both candidates.
So my question is, what are your thoughts on, and do you think any changes should be made to the registered party policy?
Okay, Nancy?
So, as Steph mentioned before, when I was a freshman, Greek life was very vibrant on campus. That was in terms of social life, many different facets of campus, and right now it's not that way, and that's upsetting because I believe that the fraternities on our campus, they're never malicious, and they always have the students' ideas in mind and the students' safety in mind. So, like we said, regarding Good Samaritan policy, I don't doubt for 1 second that a fraternity on this campus would call the ambulance or 911 if a student was in a situation where they really need to go to the hospital. But now, because of that Good Samaritan policy, they're going to be punished for that, and that's not okay. And I think that for registered parties, that policy also needs to be looked at and needs to be addressed, because the fraternities and the sororities on this campus should be protected, and so should the students. It's really a question of safety.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I think the registered party policy, it kind of makes organizations hesitant to register parties, and I think that's extremely dangerous. One, we don't know what is going on there, and two, there's no way we could help them. So I feel like if we switch the registered party policy to make organizations less afraid to register their parties, then we know what's going on, and we would be able to have them maybe participate in SOAP or have sober drivers on call or whatever it may be. It's all about safety, honestly. And so why would we make it harder for safety to occur?
Thank you to both.
Hi, Steph. You mentioned earlier that one of the ways you would protect students is you would enforce the student handbook, or you would create a better student senate handbook to deal with administrative oversights, or reaches, I guess. However, the administration has proven that they're willing to, I guess, either change the Constitution of the Union or, shift it, I guess. Why do you have such confidence in our, the Union Constitution or the Senate handbook when it's been proven that the administration is able to ignore such documents? How do you plan to, why do you have such faith in it?
So what I believe you're referring to earlier was I strongly advocate for the approval of the Senate on the student handbook. I do realize that the administration sometimes doesn't keep us up to date on things that are going on or things that they want to change. But in the past, it was a Senate approval on the student handbook. So I think we really do need that back, because just an endorsement isn't going to change anything that the students deem necessary. So to elaborate, I think having a one-on-one conversation with the administration and making sure that they know candidly that we want an approval rather than just an endorsement, to make sure that the work done by SLC to have changes within the handbook are actually being heard, and that changes that the student body actually want to happen, that those are being heard as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more student questions? Okay, I guess not. So we can move ahead into closing statements. Nancy, do you want to start?
I would like to thank all of you again for coming out tonight. I hope you all enjoyed your GM Day. And I'm very excited for the future of the Senate. Honestly, no matter who's elected, the Senate is on an upturn. It has a very bright future. We really laid the groundwork for that this past year, and I hope that I can make that future happen as your Grand Marshal. I hope that I can continue to advocate for a student-run union, that I can continue to advocate for student rights across all facets of campus, to increase the diversity, to start more discussions about sustainability, and to really make sure that all student voices are heard. And I hope that you'll allow me to do that by electing me your Grand Marshal.
Thank you. And Steph?
So I'm the best candidate for Grand Marshal because I've already worked with the student body as a whole. I will be unrelenting in fighting for student rights, and I have a comprehensive plan to do so. I believe that I really could do a lot, that we could really do a lot in a year, and we can really get, if not our student-run union completely student-run back, we can make steps toward it. I believe that we can really make a difference with student rights and better represent the students. So I thank you all for being here tonight, and I hope I have your support in tomorrow's election.
Okay. Thank you to both candidates. Great job. Before we wrap up for the evening, I would like to shout out a quick thank you to UPAC Lights, UPAC Sound, RPI Debate, GM Week, and RPI TV for helping us set up this event and all of GM Week. It's been super great. As a reminder to everyone, voting is from, 9 to 6? 9 to 7. In Commons, the Union, and the DCC tomorrow. So go vote. And as an announcement, the GMPU roast is from 8 to 9, so you should all go to that because it's super fun. Great job. Thank you.